So this is the winner of this week's Star Reading Assembly vote. We have gone for War Game by Michael Foreman, and I've got to say this is one of my Year 6 favourite star readers. Then the tiny lights appeared in the German trenches. As far as the eye could see, Christmas trees were flickering along the parapet of the German lines. It was Christmas Eve. A single German voice began to sing Silent Night. It was joined by many others. The British replied with the first Noel to applause from the Germans, and so it went on, turn and turn about. Then both front lines sang O Come, O Ye Faithful. It was a beautiful moonlit night. Occasionally a star shell hung like a star of Bethlehem. At dawn, when the British were all stood to on the fire step, they saw a world white with frost. The few shattered trees that remained were white. Lines of wire glinted like tinsel. The humps of dead in no man's land were like toppled snowmen. After the singing of the night, the Christmas dawn was strangely quiet. The clock of death had stopped ticking. Then a German climbed from his trench and planted a Christmas tree in no man's land. Freddie, being a goalkeeper, and therefore a bit daft, walked out and shook hands with him. Both sides applauded. A small group of men from each side, unarmed, joined them. They all shook hands. One of the Germans spoke good English and said he hoped the war would end soon because he wanted to return to his job as a taxi driver in Birmingham. It was agreed that they should take the opportunity to bury the dead. The bodies were mixed up together. They were sorted out and a joint burial service was held on the halfway line. Both sides then returned to their trenches for breakfast. Will and the lads were cheered by the wonderful smell of bacon, and they had a hot breakfast for a change. One by one, birds began to arrive from all sides. The soldiers hardly ever saw a bird normally, but Will counted at least 50 sparrows hopping around their trench. Christmas presents for the men consisted of a packet of chocolate, OXO cubes, a khaki handkerchief, peppermints, camp cocoa, writing paper and a pencil. After breakfast, a pair of horses and a wagon arrived with Princess Mary's Christmas gifts, a pipe and tobacco and a Christmas card from the King and Queen.
There were no planes overhead, no observation balloons, no bombs, no rifle fire, no snipers, just an occasional skylark. The early mist lifted to reveal a clear blue sky. The Germans were strolling about on their parapet once more and waved to the British to join them. Soon there was quite a crowd in no man's land. Both sides exchanged small gifts. One German had been a barber in Holborn in London. A chair was placed on the halfway line, and he gave haircuts to several of the British soldiers. Then, from somewhere, a football bounced across the frozen mud. Will was on it in a flash. He trapped the ball with his left foot, flipped it up with his right and headed it towards Freddie. Freddie made a spectacular dive, caught the ball in both hands and threw it to a group of Germans.
Immediately, a vast, fast and furious football match was underway. Goals were marked by caps. Freddie, of course, was in one goal and a huge German in the other. Apart from that, it was wonderfully disorganised. Part football, part ice skating, with unknown members on each team. No referee, no account of the score. It was just terrific to be no longer an army of moles, but up and running on top of the ground that had threatened to entomb them for so long. And this time Will really could hear a big crowd, and he was playing for England.
Some of the British officers took a dim view of such sport, and when the game came to its exhausted end, the men were encouraged back to their trenches for a carol service and supper. The haunting sound of the men singing drifted back and forth across no man's land in the still of the night air. "Good night, Tommy, see you tomorrow." "Good night, Fritz, we'll have another game." But Boxing Day passed without a game. The officers were alarmed at what had happened on Christmas Day. If such friendly relations continued, how could they get the men to fight again? How could the war continue? The men were not allowed to leave the trenches. There were a few secret meetings here and there along the front, and gifts and souvenirs were exchanged. 2 more days passed peacefully. Then a message was thrown over from the German side. A very important general was due to visit their section at 3:15 that afternoon, and he would want to see some action. The Germans, therefore, would start firing at 3 p.m. and the Tommies should please keep their heads down. At 3 o'clock, a few warning shots were fired over the British trenches, and then the heavy firing lasted for an hour. The Tommies kept their head down.